There was once a town in the heart of America where all life seemed to live in harmony with its surroundings. The town lay in the midst of a checkerboard of prosperous farms with fields of grain and hillsides of orchards where, in spring, white clouds of bloom drifted above the green fields. In autumn, oak and maple and birch set up a blaze of color that flamed and flickered across a backdrop of pines. Then a strange blight crept over the area, and everything began to change. Some evil spell had settled on the community. Mysterious maladies swept the flocks of chickens, the cattle and sheep sickened and died. Everywhere was a shadow of death. In post-World War II America, pesticides were seen as a saving grace. In the war, they had been used to kill disease-carrying mosquitoes, ultimately saving the lives of many troops. The primary pesticide used was a substance known as DDT. DDT, short for dichloryl diphenyltrichloroethane, was discovered to have seemingly magical bug-killing capacities in 1939 by Swiss Paul Muller, who won the Nobel Prize for his discovery. After the war, the large stores of DDT that the chemical companies had manufactured for the war effort went to use. It soon became commercial, used for everything from the large-scale aerial spraying of crops to household products. DDT was considered so safe you could eat it. Children were allowed to play in the chemicals, and people would stand outside while they were being sprayed from the sky. Unfortunately, this was a false sense of comfort. In reality, DDT was slowly killing them all, for it was a deadly poison that smote not only the pest for which it was intended, but all life that came into contact with it. Not all life was immediately killed by the chemical, though. DDT accumulated in the fat cells of the body over time. This resulted in birth defects, cancer, or infertility. As environmentalist Rachel Carson wrote, "Can anyone believe it is possible to lay down such a barrage of poisons on the surface of the earth without making it unfit for all life? They should not be called insecticides, but biocides." Rachel Carson was one of the first to be concerned about this after her friend wrote her a letter describing the unnatural death of birds. While she had originally hoped someone else would take up the cause, having written 3 best-selling scientific books already, it soon became evident that Carson was the most qualified. Thus starts the story of Rachel Carson's battle to protect the environment. With her salient leadership, Carson was the most influential instigator of the environmental movement because she managed to effectively communicate her unorthodox perspective regarding the environment. Carson's 1962 book Silent Spring started the worldwide environmental movement by drawing the world's attention to the deleterious effects of the overuse of pesticides, which prompted a change in government legislation and instilled a sense of environmental concern in the general public. Rachel Carson could be described as a shy and introverted person, yet she shook the foundation of public opinion concerning the environment through Silent Spring. She took complex biological ideas and made them understandable and relevant to the general populace.
She became a leader because other people could use what she wrote and what she said to galvanize action.
Carson was vehemently attacked by chemical companies for her claims. Rather than finding fault with her science, they chose to focus on personally insulting Carson, calling her a bunny hugger and claiming that because she was a woman, her feeble mental capacities disqualified her from the field of science. Despite this, Carson stood by her views, quietly but firmly defending her science.
If man were to faithfully follow the teachings of Miss Carson, we would return to the Dark Ages, and the insects and diseases and vermin would once again inherit the earth.
In response to Silent Spring, the government chose to heed Carson's warning and for the first time acknowledge its role in the protection of the environment. In May 1963, President Kennedy's Science Advisory Committee issued its pesticide report. It supported the use of pesticides in maintaining the quality of the nation's food and health, but warned against their indiscriminate use. The report states, "Public interest in the protection of the nation's health and its resources has led to the enactment of legislation and the establishment of administrative procedures to regulate the marketing and use of pesticides." The government acknowledging the danger of pesticides was the starting point of a series of legislation being passed to protect the environment and the health of the citizens. Examples of such legislation are the Clean Air Act of 1962 and the Clean Water Act of 1972. Additionally, 10 years after the publication of Silent Spring, the United States government banned the use of DDT within the country. Perhaps the most important government decision regarding the environment was the creation of the Environmental Protection Agency, aka the EPA. Established in 1970, its purpose is to recommend ecologically sound policies to the President and to conduct research on environmental hazards. The environmental awareness that Carson advocated in Silent Spring, as well as her message about the dangers of pesticides, has been taken to heart by governments around the world. Since its publication in 1962, Silent Spring has been translated into 17 different languages, including Icelandic, Korean, and Turkish. After it was released in Sweden in 1963, Silent Spring caused an even larger controversy there than it had caused in the US. Even the language changed, as the word pesticide transmuted to the word biocide, the way Carson had referred to the chemicals in her book. In 1967, Sweden became the first country to create a government agency devoted to protecting the environment, which they called the Environmental Protection Board. It also passed comprehensive legislation to conserve nature, known as the Environmental Protection Law. 3 years later, the country banned DDT. Silent Spring also influenced the direction of civilian-formed organizations devoted to the protection of the environment. Carson was involved in many organizations in her life, such as the Audubon Society, the Sierra Club, and the Nature Conservancy. After Carson's death, more organizations such as the Rachel Carson Council and the Rachel Carson Center were founded in her honor.
There's something called the Rachel Carson Council, but it keeps her the kinds of issues that she was interested in front of people.
Silent Spring inspired citizens to care about the environment, which prompted them to form their own organizations to help combat environmental issues. In this way, even though Carson did not live long after the publication of her book, she had a posthumous effect on the environmental movement. Carson wrote with love and affection for the environment, and she was able to instill the same awe of nature in her readers that still fuels environmentalists today.
I think her biggest attitude was love. She loved the natural world. We'd get pails of seawater and little creatures from the sea and bring them up to her cottage and look at them through the microscope. And it wasn't a scientific lesson. It was showing me how beautiful a tiny, tiny, tiny starfish is.
Rachel Carson's influence is seen in the environmental debates that are raging all over the world to this day, which are facing similar battles that she fought in her war against the careless use of pesticides. Today, our world struggles with climate change caused by the excessive burning of fossil fuels. As Carson wrote, "Only within the moment of time represented by the present century has one species, man, acquired significant power to alter the nature of his world."
This was the first that people realized that science could be manipulated and it could backfire. Because if we don't solve climate change, all the other issues aren't really going to matter, are they?
With the current issue of climate change, there has been much debate over both its existence and man's connection to it. Carson was the first to prove that humans have a direct and profound impact on their environment. She made the general public realize that their actions, however seemingly small, have a lasting effect on the environment and the entire interconnectedness of life. This argument directly relates to climate change, as many argue that the warming of the Earth has no relation to humanity's burning of greenhouse gases.
The balance of nature is built of a series of interrelationships between living things and between living things and their environment.
Had Rachel Carson not written Silent Spring and not brought the negative effects of the overuse of pesticides to the attention of the public and governments around the world, the global environmental movement might not have started at all. If the movement had not occurred when it did, the ecological status of the world would be far worse than that of today. Now there's a higher awareness for the impact that the human race has on the environment, leading governments and civilian conceived organizations to take an active role in its preservation.